a new Sunday school lesson, quarterly. New Sunday school quarterly. Everybody got their Sunday school quarterly? Okay. God's dealings with Joseph. Some people say the Old Testament is difficult to understand. Some even say the Old Testament is boring. We are not here to argue the point, however. I would put the true story of Jacob's family up against any best-selling novel ever published. Woven into the story, directly or indirectly, are some emotions as, example, love, hate, envy, jealous, deceit, revenge, guilt, grief, greed, seduction, dreams, partiality, mystery, suspense, punishment, rewards, trust, faithfulness, conviction, humility, patience, and forgiveness. My little mind would not be able to come up with all that, so I have to give Brother Weindorf the allegiance for that. But I got to thinking about each and every one of them. There's a bunch of them. I didn't even count them, how many there was. There's a bunch of them. But you know, in that family of Jacob and Joseph, that all was there, you know. Joseph is the key character in these lessons. However, his father Jacob is also one of God's chosen people. God changed his name to Israel. All right. And he became the namesake of the Israelites. The Bible mentions the children of Israel over how many times in the Bible? Would anybody want to take a guess at that? A lot. 600. Over 600 times. We hope, and this is what Brother Weindorf is saying, we hope you will not only find these lessons interesting, but also proof that God always accomplish His purpose or purposes, even when everything seems to be hopeless. This was a teacher's guide, and it wasn't in your quarterly, and I thought, I'm going to read that because that is so very good there, what he had mentioned in that. And so I wanted to read that there. So and I got a kick out of it. I got a blessing out of that. So I wanted to read that. As we study this lesson here, our first lesson is going to be Joseph's dreams, with an S, plural, dreams, Joseph's dreams. And as we study this, our whole quarterly is going to be on Joseph, pretty much the life of Joseph there. Joseph. Jacob had 12 sons. Their names were Reuben. I'm going to try and get through this. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, I may be pronouncing that one wrong, and Zebulun. These were the sons of Leah, is who these were. There was 2, 4, 6 of them. Then there was Dan and Naphtali. Okay. These were the sons of Bilhad. And that was, that was, I think that was Leah's handmaid. Okay? Them 2. Then there was 2 others, Gad and Asher, from the sons of Zilpah, Zilpah, and that was the handmaid of no, I've got that wrong. The first one was Rachel's handmaid. This one was Leah's handmaid. And then Joseph and Benjamin were the sons of Rachel. And really, Leah and Rachel was the wife of Jacob. But the reason they mentioned Rachel last is because them two children fell last being born. Joseph and Benjamin was. And so that's the reason why they were mentioned last. Rachel was Jacob's favorite wife, and she died when Benjamin was born. We need to know this because this will help us to understand why Jacob showed so much partiality and favoritism toward her two sons. God also had his hand upon Joseph. Early in our lessons, we will read of a beautiful coat that Jacob gave Joseph. In addition, God gave Joseph some special dreams. Both of these events caused envy, jealousy, and hatred toward Joseph from his 10 older brothers. And then remember, Benjamin, there was 12 of them, 10 older ones, Joseph, and then Benjamin was the baby of the family there. So remember that. Notice how their sin gave each of them a guilty conscience, resulting in much grief, both to themselves and to their father Jacob. So remember that. We will see how, one, God watches over an individual who trusts him and uses all things that happen to bring good to him. You know, think about Joseph. And as we study this, think about how Joseph was true and faithful to God, even though he was mistreated, punished for things that he didn't do, but yet his attitude was always good. Number two, God's promises and predictions are always perfectly fulfilled. So remember that. That's number two. Number three, Joseph was a type of Christ. Number four, the lives of the brothers show the plan of salvation. And number five, God always works out his purposes. When we do wrong, there will always be consequences. We're going to suffer the consequences when we do wrong. And Joseph had lots of opportunities to do wrong. He had several opportunities to do wrong, but he was faithful in each and everything that he did. If we live right, there will always be rewards. Let's remember that. If we don't remember anything else, let's remember that. Okay, now we'll get started on the lesson. But first of all, what does the word Joseph mean? What does the name Joseph mean? Does anybody know? I had to look it up. Does anybody want to take a stab at it? Okay, the name Joseph means God will add or God will increase. I learned that today. So, well, actually, yesterday evening, I got to thinking about I do most of my studying Sunday morning, but I got to thinking about, well, we're starting a new quarterly, and it's all about Joseph. What does that word mean? So I went to, I've got a little baby book there of all kinds of names, and I thought, I'm going to look that up and see what it says. Okay, Joseph, or Joses, Joses, is considered the same name. How many different people were named that was mentioned in the Bible? Do you have any idea on that? Does anybody want to take a stab at it?
Well, there's Joseph, the husband of Mary.
Yes.
Stepfather of Jesus.
Yes.
Joseph of Arimathea.
Yes.
One of the brothers of Jesus was Joseph.
Okay. He's mentioned 4.
Somebody else know?
In the lineage of Jesus, there was also another Joseph before his father Joseph, or his earthly father Joseph. There was also another one. So that would be 5 that that a person can think of. Well, there's 14. There's 14 in the Bible. I did not realize there was that many. And so there was 14 of them in there. Here's another statistic that I looked up. And as far back as it would go, since 1880 to 1889, that's a decade there, and 1890 to 1899, each decade, from the 1880s to, I'm going to say current, but I'm only taking it to 2010 because that's all the information I had. Joseph was in the top at least 13 of the names, popular names given in the United States. Every decade it was at least 13th or better. And I don't think it was ever number one, but I think it was number 3 one decade. So every decade it was one of the most common names. So I thought that was some of the statistics that you would like to know. I like statistics. I'm not saying the words right, but I like numbers. So you see where I get that from there in that. But yes, I thought that is quite something, because I think that's the only boy's name. That's what I looked at, was boy's name.
Names that they associate good things with.
I think so too, because
You don't have too many named Judas.
that's exactly what I was getting ready to say. There's not very many Judases, is there? In the life of Joseph, we have one of the most complete biographies found in the Bible. From his birth in Haran, Haran, I may be pronouncing that wrong, to his death in Egypt, we have Joseph's record, much of it in great detail. And that is true. That is true. So let's go ahead and get started here. Title of our lesson is Joseph's Dream. Our memory verse, known unto God are all his works from the beginning of the world. That is Acts 15 and 18. That is that's a New Testament verse. And here we're going to be studying in the Old Testament. But you know, we already know the history of Joseph. We already know what all happened. But you know, Joseph didn't know what was in store for him as he became a youth. And you know, it tells when he was born, tells that wasn't long after his birth that Benjamin came along then. And I don't know how many years, how old Joseph was when Benjamin was born, but Joseph lost his mother the time that Benjamin was born, and I figure he was probably 5 or less. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my interpretation of it. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I'm guessing. And so he more or less grew up without a mother, because because she died during Benjamin's childbirth there. That's emphasis. You have the adult emphasis. I'm going to read the junior emphasis. It's kind of short there, and the adult pretty much takes care of it. God spoke to Joseph in his dreams. Joseph's brothers were jealous of Joseph because their father had showed favoritism to him. And you know, we as parents, we have to be very careful of this, not to show favoritism towards one or the other child, because that's only going to stir up a mess later on. So
Problems that wouldn't be there if it wasn't.
right. And I don't care if it's between boys and boys, or girls and girls, or even boys and girls. We have to be very careful. We got to love each and every one. Now, I only had boys, you know, so that's all I had to deal with. I didn't have girls, and you all the same way. But you know, there's other here in the congregation that has both. So, you know, you have a big challenge ahead of you. I'll admit to that. You have a big challenge ahead of you. I grew up with girls, you know, three younger girls. There was one boy and three younger girls, you know. But I have to say that my parents did not show favoritism to me, I don't think, or to any of the girls. I don't think, you know. And so we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful in this. This is given to us as part of helping us to be able to understand, you know, how to raise our children. You know, Jacob might have showed favoritism. He showed, and we can see that he did show favoritism. But we can realize that, you know, it brought trouble later on. It brought sorrow. It brought a lot of things later on. So we need to be very careful in that. Let's go ahead and get started then. Finally, we'll get started here. Genesis 37:1. Brother Bayless, if you would be so kind as to read that, because there's a couple of women's names in there. I don't want to stumble through them again, so I'm going to let you go ahead and read that if you would.
And Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was a son of his old age. And he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him.
All right. This time here is after Jacob had fled. He was unmarried. He fled from his brother because he had stolen the birthright. Or you might say Esau had sold the birthright to Jacob. I don't know which is right, but anyway, Jacob was the younger of the two, and he was the one that had the birthright. And so this made Esau very upset. And so Jacob had to flee for his life. And so he went north of Canaan and up into the area of Haran, Haran. Am I saying that right? Haran? Haran. Okay, Haran. Okay. And he had went up there. And he had relation that lived up there. And he worked for I believe as an uncle is who he worked for. And so that's where he was at. Well, his uncle had a nice looking daughter, which he fell in love with. And so he worked 7 years for that daughter. Well, when the time came for him to marry that daughter, why, his uncle had deceived him and had given him the older girl. And so she became his wife. Well, that didn't go over real good, but anyway, he said he had to work. His father-in-law, which was his uncle, says he has to work another 7 years for the girl that he really wanted. But he said, I'll go ahead and give you her too. So that's how he wound up with the two wives then. And then in due process, they had the children. And I think most of the children was born up in that area also. Matter of fact, I think all of them was. And so he worked 14 years up there. And then he comes back. And Esau meets him then. And they resolve their little differences and one thing and another. And so now it's picking up to where Jacob and his two wives, which I think it was only one because I think the Rachel had already passed away. And so he had his one wife, which was Leah, which he preferred Rachel anyway. you know. But anyway, they're back here in Canaan. And Joseph now is 17 years old. He's out in the field with his brothers, and they're feeding the flocks and one thing and another. And then it gives us kind of the background here of how Jacob prefers Joseph, and he loves Joseph. And I can see his point why he would love Joseph, because Jacob and Rachel tried for years to have children, and she was barren. She did not have children. And that's one reason why she gave her handmaiden to Jacob to have children to raise up for her then, because she couldn't have children. Well, then later on, why Rachel did have the two children, which was Joseph and Benjamin. And then she, during childbearing, there is when she died then. But Joseph always preferred, Jacob always preferred Joseph. He always did. And he preferred Benjamin to a certain extent, but I believe Joseph was still his favorite one, you know. But and we will run into a situation later on in our lessons to where we find out that Benjamin was a little bit preferred too, and stayed back because he was younger, and one thing, and we'll run into that here later. But and we see this here in verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph. In verse 1 it says, and Jacob. Now remember, this is the same guy, Jacob and Israel. God had changed his name from Jacob to Israel. And the reason for that is, I didn't study that, but I'm trying to reach back and help me out here. Jacob, the name Jacob meant supplanter, or a tricker, one who tricks. And this is what Jacob was. Oh, he was good at tricking people. I mean, you know, he tricked his brother out of the birthright. And then after he had to leave, then he tricked his father-in-law into some different things, and about how to get cattle and flocks and stuff like that. And that's kind of what he was. But then on his way back, I think he was at Bethel. And I think that's where, I may be wrong on that, but I think that's where God changed his name to Israel. What does the name Israel mean?
A prince with God.
A prince with God. And you know, God said, this is what your name is going to be now. And you know, that would be kind of a relief to me if I was named supplanter or tricker, and then my name was changed to Prince with God. I would think that would be a very good blessing, wouldn't it? You know, to think that God put that on me, put that name on me, you know. And so this is the same person. Verse 1, Jacob. Verse 2, now Israel, is the same person there. And so I'm just kind of giving you a background of what all it was there. Now Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children. More than all of his children. Because he was the son of his old age. And he had made him a coat of many colors. What's significant about a coat of many colors? You know, we think, well, why was this so important? Was it made out of other cloths, the parts of other cloths, you know? Is that what it was? I don't know. I don't know why it was. But he gave him kind of a token that I prefer you. You know. That's kind of what it was. It was a mark on Joseph, really. And it wasn't really a good mark. Oh yeah, between him and his dad it was a good mark, but between him and the rest of his siblings, no, that was not a good mark, Dan.
The many colors indicates royalty.
Oh.
You know, at that time, the children, the princes and princesses of the monarchs were oftentimes clothed in coats of many colors.
Oh.
It was splendid and royal.
I see. Oh yeah.
Prince and princess.
Uh-huh. And then in verse 4, and it says, and when his brethren saw that his father loved him more than all his brethren, which they can pick up on that very quick. You know, children can pick up on that sometimes even before they even get in school. You know, they can pick up on that. Well, these guys did, and they were older too. Oh, that little snotty-nosed brother of ours, you know, Dad prefers him, and I don't understand why. You know, that's probably some of the conversation that went on between the 10 older brothers, you know. They hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. You know, and he was hated of his brothers. He had a rough road to hoe, because these guys was all older than him, you know. He had to look up to them guys, you know. And, you know, it even says that he would bring the report back to his dad. Well, guess what? These other older boys, this little feller here, he's causing us a lot of trouble, you know. And they never did like him. They did not like him until later. But at this time, they did not like him at all. And they thought he was a tattletale, probably. They probably thought, you know, here he is. Dad favors him over us. I just can't understand why, you know. We're the ones out here that's making the living for Dad, you know. And here yet he prefers this little feller, you know. And Joseph had a problem here. Let's go into the next reading there. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brother. Oh my goodness, digging a hole deeper, digging your own grave. You know, after we know what the dream was and everything. But then he goes and tells his brother. And they hated him yet the more. Why? And he said unto them, Hear, I pray thee, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obeisance, okay, to my sheaf. Okay, what's a sheaf? It's a shock. It's like a shock. It's grain being gathered up and wrapped up and set up. Usually you have to lay it down. It's laying down when you tie it up, you know, and then you usually stand it up, you know. Or somebody stands it up. Maybe the one tying it just leaves it, and then somebody comes along behind, stands it up. But this one, he says that the sheaves rose up in his dream, you know. Okay, verse 8. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? They're asking him that. And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. You know, have you ever had a dream that the next morning when you wake up, it's so much on your mind that you think about it the whole day long? I have. I've had dreams that I mean, it makes an impression on you, you know. Yeah, I've also had dreams to where I woke up the next morning and I had a dream, but I can't remember what it was, you know. And, you know, and you might think about that during the day, but, you know, it does make near the impression on your mind as one that really makes an impression on your mind, so to speak. Well, I think this was a dream that really made an impression on Joseph's mind, and he had to tell somebody, you know, yeah, this sounds kind of weird and different and all, but Joseph knew that there was something in this dream, and he didn't know yet what it was, but that it needed to be told, you know. Oh my, if he only knew how much mess he was going to get into for telling this, but still it was God's will that he told him. He couldn't see into the future. He didn't know he was going to be let down into a pit. He didn't know that yet, you know. And he thought, you know, maybe he even thought that maybe the brothers will kind of understand and kind of come my way even. He might even thought that. Well, no, that did not happen. That did not happen. While Joseph helped his brother feed the sheep, he told him his dream, and he had dreamed that he and his brother were binding sheaves. His sheaves stood up, and his brother's sheaves bowed down to it. You know, well, when the brothers heard that dream, they hated Joseph even more. You mean to think you're going to rule over us? That's probably what they said. They did not know that someday he would rule over them. However, God knew it, and God gave the dream to Joseph, you know. Joseph didn't even know he was going to be a ruling over them, you know. But eventually that all come into play. It all happened. And so here's his dream. That was his first dream. Okay. Now, another night or two later, we got Genesis 37 and 9. And he dreamed yet, this is Joseph, and he dreamed yet another dream, and told it to his brother and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made, say that word again. Okay, to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him. His father even rebuked him for saying it, and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? And his brethren envied him, for his father observed the saying. You know, his father loved him, remember. Now his father could take a whole lot more from what Joseph was saying because he preferred him. He preferred him. Now the brothers, just all at once, they says, oh no, this, you got to be kidding here, little Joseph. You've got to be kidding, you know. But you know, how do we know when a prophet is telling the truth? How do we know when a prophet's telling the truth? If those things happen, we know that they're telling the truth, you know. You know, I think we studied, it's been several quarterlies ago, about Agabus. Do you remember studying about Agabus? You know, he made some prophecies. This was in the New Testament. This was during Paul's time. He made some prophecies that came true. And it came time for Paul to leave this area where he was at, and Agabus took the girdle from Paul, and he bound Paul's hands. Or he bound his own hands. That's what he did. And he says, the owner of this girdle here is going to be bound when he gets to Rome. Or on his way to Rome, he's going to be bound. And people believed him because he had said things before that came true. And you know what? That happened too. And of course they was encouraging Paul not to go to Rome, but Paul felt it was the best interest of God that he go to Rome then. And so I'm bringing this out to show you that if a prophet or so-called prophet makes a prediction or a prophecy, we'll just say prophecy because it's either true prophecy or it's false prophecy, and it does not happen, then we know that there's something wrong there. But if a prophet makes a prophecy and it does come to pass, then we know that yes, there's probably something there. Joseph's dream. Joseph's dreams here. First, it was just the brothers was included in the sheaves. But then his second dream came and it included mom and daddy. Now, I know mother was already dead at this time. Mom was already gone. But I think it was kind of to show that it included the whole family is what he's talking about. It included 11 of the brothers, all 11. It didn't just include the 10 older ones, but it also included Benjamin too, 11 of them. There was 12 sheaves out there. One was lifted up kinda, and the other all gathered around. See, the other 11 all gathered around. And then in this, it was the stars and the moon and the sun. And it was all 11 of them, and plus mother and father there. God gave Joseph this dream. Joseph told his brothers that he had dreamed this. They asked, and the father asked, will your mother and I and your brothers bow down to you? Yes, even that was to happen, except for his mother who had died, you know. Now, they did not know how it would be. You know, he's not entitled to no birthright. That was, I believe, Reuben's interest, you know. Joseph wasn't the one to get the birthright, you know. Reuben was the firstborn. And so, you know, how is this little, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it respectfully, how does this little snotty-nosed brother of ours think that he's going to get away with all this stuff, you know? You know why? You know why it happened that way? He was following God. That's what he was doing. He was following God. And so that, you know, God is going to reward us when we follow him. I can guarantee you that God will reward us for following him. Now, they did not know how this would happen. Nevertheless, God knew. Jacob remembered and thought about the dream. However, Joseph's brothers were very jealous and angry. They were not pleased with little Joseph. They were not pleased with him at all. Our memory verse, known unto God are all his works from the beginning of the world. Who sent the dreams? How can we know who sent the dreams that Joseph had? How can we know whether they were true messages or just ordinary dreams? You know, that's some of the questions that can be asked by people that are not churched, you know. How can we know who sent the dreams? Well, we know that God sent the dreams. Well, how do you know that? How can we know whether they were true message or just ordinary dreams? Because they came to pass.
Exactly the way God did.
That's exactly the way God had relayed that message to little old Joseph, you know. Now, no, it didn't happen the next day or the next week or the next year. It was time after time after time before this all came to pass, you know. There is one way we can know they come true later. God must have sent them. Don't you think God was the one that sent them? Who else could have sent them? Benjamin couldn't send them to Joseph, his brother. His father couldn't send him because his father wouldn't even believe what he said. You know, a relative, an uncle, whoever couldn't have sent that to Joseph. But God sent it to Joseph because God is all-knowing. Who else is all-knowing? No one. God is all-knowing. And that's the reason why it was Him that sent that. And it came out just exactly the way it was. How many dreams do you think Joseph had or interpreted in his lifetime? There were several of them. You know it? He had 2 right here. Okay? Okay, he also had one with a butler and with a baker. He also had 2 dreams that he interpreted about 7 big fat cows and 7 little skinny cows eating up the 7 fat cows. And I believe there was another dream that sheaves or something eat up the healthier sheaves, I believe. So there are 6 dreams right there. I believe I'm telling you right on that. But there were 6 dreams that either he had or he interpreted for somebody. And there might have even been more than that too, you know. That wasn't even recorded. But you know, every one of them came to pass just as he had told. You know, one of them, the butler and the baker, I believe it was the butler, I believe was restored back to the king. He had done something wrong and he was in prison. He was restored back to the king. The baker, oh, that sounded good. So the baker says, well, I had a dream and here's what it was. Well, Joseph says, I've got bad news for you. You're going to be put to death, you know. And guess what? Both of them happened exactly that way. Not because Joseph said that, but because God had relayed the future to him. And that was the reason why. God must have sent them dreams. He knows the future, and he knew what he was going to do. Joseph's character in the points to consider. Let's look at that, Joseph's character. Not only is Joseph a type of Christ, but he can be compared to David. David was also the youngest child and was held in derision and ridicule by his brothers. Don't you remember that? You know, he was the son of Jesse. And Samuel did not even recognize all the things that God was relaying to what was going on. Because don't you remember, God told Samuel, I want you to go to Jesse's house. I want you to anoint the next king. Okay, so that's what Samuel done. Samuel went to the house, and of course, it was custom that they bring in the oldest boy, you know. They brought in the first one. Samuel said, whoa, man, this old boy would make a good king, you know. And God told him, says, nope, he's not the one. And so he brought the second one in. Oh, well, yeah, he'll work. And God says, no, that's not the one. And I think he stopped it. I think God stopped Samuel at that time and says, now listen here, Samuel. And Samuel was a godly man too. And he says, listen here, Samuel. You're looking on the outward part. I'm looking at the heart. You don't anoint anybody until I tell you to, you know. And so they brought in 6 boys. And every one of them God rejected. Said, nope, that's not the one. That's not the one. And so Samuel says, do you have any more children? Well, I got a little guy out there in the pasture. He's watching the sheep. Samuel says, we're not going to eat till you bring him in. And that's little old David, who it is. Brings David in. God says, that's the next king right there. You mean that little feller is going to be our next king? Yep, that's what. And look what kind of king David turned out to be, you know. God knew what he was doing. If he had chose one of them other 6 guys, history would have been probably changed tremendously, you know. But you know, and that's the same way we are. We have to let God lead. We have to let God do the leading, and we have to do the following. Let the head lead. We hear sometimes we're following the body. No, we don't need to follow the body. We need to follow the head. That's what we need to do. Follow the head. And so, God chose David to deliver the Israelites from the enemies, the Philistines. God chose Joseph to save his people from famine. Jacob loved Joseph more because he was the son of old age, as we mentioned before, and the son of his favorite wife, and no doubt more humble and obedient than his brothers were. We can kind of see that. We can kind of see where that was a reality. This really made his older brothers hate him. God often used despised things to confound the mighty. According to the natural man, the younger should be bowing to the older. That was the natural thing, and that's the way these 11 other boys, or at least 10 other boys, thought. Well, you should be bound to us, But no, that's not. God had different idea. God was revealing his secret to this humble servant. Joseph was not trying to exalt himself. As far as we know, he wasn't trying to do that. And as he lived his life later on, I think that's very true. Joseph was not trying to exalt himself. And I think his life was, the way he lived his life was persistent to what I'm saying here and what was brought out in our lesson. So our next lesson, next Sunday, will be Joseph is sold by his brothers. They hated him so much they got rid of him. So they think. But stay tuned, because there's more to it than that.